It was a cold, dark night. The clock struck 3 a.m., the devil's hour. Inside a small bedroom, she lay tied to her bed with thick, rough ropes. Her body thrashed violently. Her eyes rolled back. The room shook with a force no one could see. The angry demons inside her screamed in twisted, guttural voices. Some laughed, some cried, some cursed the heavens. And then, suddenly, a voice louder than all the others roared through the darkness. It growled,
"She belongs to us."
The lights flickered. The air turned ice cold. The priests standing nearby held up their crosses, trembling. This is the true story of Anneliese Michel. A story so horrifying, the world still struggles to explain what really happened. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in a small town in Germany. From a young age, she seemed different, quiet, sensitive. But no one suspected anything dark or evil. She grew up in a deeply Catholic family. Church was not just a part of their lives, it was their life. Confession, prayer, obedience. These were the rules of their world. At 16, everything changed. One morning, Annalise blacked out at school. She woke up not knowing how she got there. Soon after, terrifying seizures began. Doctors said it was temporal lobe epilepsy, a disorder that could cause hallucinations. But Annalise knew something was terribly wrong. She started hearing whispers. Dark, cold voices calling her name. She saw shadowy figures standing at the edge of her bed at night. Her parents watched helplessly as their bright, beautiful daughter slipped into a strange, invisible nightmare. Medication didn't help. Therapy didn't help. The visions grew darker. The voices grew louder. The feeling of something evil inside her grew stronger. Sometimes, she couldn't even enter a church. Whenever she tried, her body would stiffen, her face twisting in pain. Holy water burned her skin. Crucifixes made her scream. Her parents knew this was beyond medicine. They knew something ancient and terrible had taken hold of their daughter. But what they didn't know was, this was only the beginning. It got worse. Much worse. The sweet girl her family once knew was almost gone. Annalise didn't just see shadows anymore. She became something else. Her once gentle face twisted into horrific shapes. She snarled like a wild animal. Sometimes, she growled words in languages she had never learned. Ancient languages, Latin, Aramaic. At night, the walls shook violently. Heavy footsteps could be heard stomping across the empty house. Objects flew off shelves. Doors slammed shut by themselves. Her family would find her crouching in corners, eyes black as coal, whispering things so vile no one dared repeat them. She barely ate. She bit her own arms. She licked urine off the floor like a possessed beast. And then, the voices started speaking through her. Not one, not two, 6 different voices, all claiming to be demons. They called themselves names that chilled the soul: Lucifer, Judas, Nero, Cain, Hitler, and one simply known as the Damned. Each voice sounded different. Each voice spoke hate, rage, destruction. She would scream for hours without stopping. She would rip her clothes off. She would kneel and stand, hundreds of times until her knees bled. Her family was trapped in a nightmare with no end. Neighbors began whispering. Priests were called, but many refused to get involved. Some said it was mental illness. Some said it was pure evil. The smell of burning flesh often filled her room, even though there was no fire. Crosses on the walls cracked in half by themselves. One day, her mother entered her room and froze. Annalise sat in the center of the floor, eyes wide open, head tilted unnaturally back. She smiled, not with love, but with something inhuman. A deep voice that was not her own said, "We will not leave. She belongs to us now." The priests finally agreed. This was no ordinary illness. This needed an exorcism. Not just one exorcism. 67 sessions, over months and months, each lasting for hours, each more brutal than the last. The first exorcism began on a cold September night. Annalise, thin and trembling, was tied to the bed. The priest began chanting. The room grew unbearably cold. The candles around them flickered violently, even though there was no wind. The demons laughed and spat blasphemies. Annalise howled in agony, her body lifting off the bed. Sometimes, she would fall silent, staring straight ahead with glassy eyes. Other times, she would snap the ropes, binding her with unnatural strength, throwing grown men across the room. Her voice dropped to a deep rumble. She cursed the priests. She cursed her parents. She cursed God himself. She began refusing food. She said the demons would not allow her to eat. Her once lively body shrank into a skeleton, her skin clinging tightly to her bones. Session after session, the priests battled the darkness inside her. But with every prayer, the demons grew angrier, stronger, more violent. Her screams could be heard from the street some nights. Blood sometimes ran from her eyes, her nose, her mouth. Neighbors crossed themselves and locked their doors. They whispered that evil had come to their village. But inside that small, cursed room, the battle for Annalise's soul raged on. Each day she slipped further away. Each night the house became colder, darker, heavier, as if hell itself was breathing through the walls. No doctor could help, no medicine could cure, and everyone deep down began to fear. Maybe she was beyond saving. The first exorcism was terrifying. The second was even worse. By the 10th, the priests weren't sure if they were fighting demons, or something even older, even darker. Annalise was no longer recognizable. Her once bright, kind eyes were now empty, black pits staring into nothing. Her body twisted into impossible shapes. Her spine arched so far back that it seemed it would snap. Her arms bent the wrong way. Bones cracked under the strain. She screamed, but it wasn't her voice anymore. It was something ancient, something cruel. She would laugh, a horrible, wet, gurgling laugh, and shout unspeakable things. "I am Legion," she roared during one session. "We are many." Sometimes during the exorcisms, her body would levitate, slowly, just a few inches above the bed, then slam down so hard the walls would shake. Blood dripped from her mouth, where she bit her own lips until they tore open. She would claw at her face, leaving deep gashes that oozed. Once, she tore a chunk of wood from the bedpost, using only her teeth. A grown man struggled to pull it free, but she had bitten it off like an animal. The room smelled terrible, like rotten eggs and burning meat. The air was so heavy that people said it felt like drowning just to stand in there. On some nights, Annalise spoke in tongues no one understood. On others, she would sob like a broken child, begging for help. "Oh, please, save me," she whispered once, before her eyes rolled back and she screamed in fury. One of the priests said he saw a shadow crawl across the ceiling. It wasn't her shadow. It moved when she stayed still. Another time, the rosary the priest held melted, right in his hands, like soft wax. Annalise would sometimes bark like a dog for hours, crawling on all fours. She would eat spiders and flies off the floor without blinking. She tore up religious icons. She urinated on the floor and smeared it on the walls. She broke her own fingers, one by one, laughing. The demons inside her mocked the priests. They mocked Jesus. They mocked her family.
She's ours. She belongs to us. She deserves all the pain. We'll kill her.
Sometimes they pretended to be Annalise, tricking everyone, begging to stop the exorcism. But when they untied her, she attacked, biting, clawing, scratching. Her face changed. At times it looked like 100 different faces flickering through her skin. Old, young, man, woman, monster. The exorcisms went on for months, day after day, night after endless night. Annalise's body grew thinner, frailer. Her eyes sank into dark pits, her lips cracked and bled. She wore the bruises and scars like medals of war, but it wasn't a war she could win. Not alone. One day, during a particularly violent exorcism, Annalise screamed that the Virgin Mary had appeared to her. Sorko.
You will suffer, but your death will save others.
She accepted it. She said she wanted to suffer for the sins of the world. From that point, she refused food and water altogether. She said it was part of her sacrifice. Her body was wasting away. Bones poked sharply through her thin, torn skin. Her eyes stayed open for hours, unblinking, hollow. The priests were exhausted. Her parents were broken. Even the neighbors began whispering that death was coming. But still, the demons clung to her, digging deeper inside her soul, rotting her from within. And so, the final sessions began. It was now June 30th, 1976. Anneliese Michel lay on the mattress, not a bed anymore, just stained sheets soaked in sweat, blood, and filth. The air inside the room was unbearable. It smelled of rotting flesh, old urine, and burnt metal. Flies buzzed around her open wounds. Maggots crawled in the dark corners of the room. Annalise weighed barely 68 pounds. Skin stretched tight over her bones. Her cheeks were sunken in, her lips cracked open, bleeding every time she tried to speak. But she still fought. Even with no strength left, she cursed, barked, hissed like an animal. Tied down by rough ropes, her wrists were raw, bone deep. Her ankles, twisted unnaturally from her violent thrashing, were swollen and purple. At one point, during the final sessions, she began gnawing at her own arm, tearing at her flesh with her teeth, trying to rip herself free. The priests, Father Alt and Father Rentz, stood nearby, drenched in sweat and fear. They whispered prayers that cracked in their dry throats. Holy water steamed when it touched her skin. When they pressed a crucifix to her forehead, her skin blistered and blackened, like paper burning from inside. Annalise's voice, or rather, the voices inside her, grew deeper, rumbling like an earthquake.
We are still here. We own her. You can't save her.
Multiple voices screamed from her broken mouth at once. Young, old, male, female, all layered together into a sickening chorus. Her mother, Anna, knelt beside her, crying, begging. But Annalise didn't recognize her anymore. Her eyes rolled back white, and she lashed out, biting her mother's hand hard enough to draw blood. Blood mixed with saliva dripped down her chin, staining the shredded fabric of her nightgown. In one final, horrific moment, Annalise lifted her head and looked at everyone. Her mouth curled into a broken, bloody smile. "Begone," she screamed in a voice that sounded like it came from the bottom of a black pit. And then she collapsed, twitching, convulsing violently. She gasped for air, like drowning. Her ribs rattled against her skin with every breath. Father Rentz grabbed the Bible tighter, reading the final rites with a voice full of terror. Tears streamed down his face. Anna cradled her daughter's broken body, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mother, stay with me," Annalise whispered. Those were her last words, barely a whisper, almost a sigh. At 6:45 a.m., Anneliese Michel died. Eyes open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. No music played, no angels sang, only the buzzing of flies and the low rumble of thunder outside. Later, when the police came, they said it looked like a battlefield. Blood on the walls, broken rosaries, holy water bottles shattered on the ground. Neighbors told police they had heard sounds during the night. Not screams, something worse. Something otherworldly. An autopsy revealed she died of malnutrition and dehydration. Her knees were broken from constant kneeling. Her face was disfigured by self-inflicted wounds. But her family and the priests insisted. It wasn't mental illness. It wasn't neglect. It was evil. Pure, raw, clawing, ancient evil. They said they had seen it. They had heard it. They had fought it and lost. The world would never forget her face, her frozen scream, her empty, hollow eyes that once belonged to a beautiful young girl full of dreams. And deep down, anyone who knew her story, even the skeptics, felt a chill that never quite left. Because if evil could devour her, it could devour anyone. The sun rose weakly over the village of Klingenberg, but nothing felt normal. The Michel household stayed draped in silence, a silence too deep, too unnatural. Annalise's body was taken away, wrapped carefully, but nothing could hide the brutal damage. Neighbors whispered. Old women crossed themselves when they walked past her house. Even animals, they said, refused to go near the front door. News spread like wildfire. A girl had died during an exorcism. A real exorcism, not some movie. A real battle between heaven and hell. When authorities launched an investigation, they were horrified. They found journals, photos, and audio tapes. Chilling evidence of the nights filled with screams, prayers, and inhuman growls. The priests, Father Alt and Father Renz, were charged with negligent homicide. So were Annalise's parents. In court, the tapes were played. People wept. Others vomited. The sounds captured inside that small room were not human. Growls layered over Latin curses, cries that rattled the soul. When the prosecutors argued Annalise was simply mentally ill, the defense fought back. They insisted. This was no disease. It was possession. Her mother took the stand, hands shaking. She swore she had seen the devil in her daughter's eyes, that she had seen shadows move in the corners, that the house would freeze even on the hottest summer days. The trial was chaos. Faith battled science. Believers fought skeptics. And through it all, Annalise's memory hovered, broken, bleeding, screaming for help that never came. In the end, the court found the priests and parents guilty of manslaughter, but handed down light sentences. No one wanted to punish them too hard. No one could say, deep down, if they'd done something wrong, or if they had been fighting something too terrifying to understand. Years later, Annalise's body was exhumed. Some believed it hadn't decomposed naturally. Some said she still looked alive, trapped between worlds. But when the coffin was opened, officials said there was nothing unusual, just a dead girl, just bones and dust. Yet visitors to her grave reported strange occurrences. The feeling of being watched, the sudden drop in temperature, the whisper of a voice in a language no one understood. Anneliese Michel's story never really ended. It became a warning whispered in dark corners, a reminder that some battles, the ones between faith and fear, light and darkness, are never truly over. And sometimes the monsters win. Even now, years after her death, the story of Anneliese Michel refuses to fade. It lingers. It claws at the edges of our minds when the lights go out, when the night grows too silent. Was it madness? Was it true possession? Or was it something far worse? Something that neither doctors nor priests could ever truly understand. They say her cries still echo through the cold stone walls where she once begged for her life. They say the ground where she rests feels colder than any other place in Klingenberg. And sometimes, if you stand by her grave long enough, you might hear a faint whisper, or a breath that isn't yours. Annalise's soul may have left her broken body, but whatever took her, whatever answered those cries, may still be waiting, watching, hungering. Some doors, once opened, are never really closed. If you felt the chill, if the darkness whispered your name tonight, then you're exactly where you need to be. Basement 13 is just getting started. More true horrors, more real nightmares, and more stories that stay with you, even after the screen goes dark. Hit that subscribe button. Like this video if you dared to watch till the end. And tell us, What dark story should we uncover next? We're waiting for you, in the shadows, always watching, always listening.